In late August 2025, the United States began a naval buildup in the southern Caribbean with the stated goal of combating drug trafficking. U.S. President Donald Trump directed the United States Armed Forces to start using military force against certain Latin American drug cartels, characterizing the smugglers as narcoterrorists. The first operation of the campaign was the 2 September strike and sinking of a vessel coming from Venezuela and allegedly involving Tren de Aragua gang members carrying illegal drugs, killing 11 people. The U.S. deployed military assets to Puerto Rico. Subsequent airstrikes destroyed other alleged drug-smuggling vessels, and the Dominican Navy engaged to recover drugs from one of the destroyed vessels. Experts, the Trump administration, and Venezuelan opposition sources stated that a likely goal of the operation is to force the departure of top figures in the Nicolás Maduro government. Others speculated that an invasion of Venezuela is unlikely and questioned the legality of the strikes on vessels. Latin America and the Caribbean. Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, initially suggested that any attack on Venezuela would equal an attack on Latin America and the Caribbean, and thus Colombia's armed forces could support Venezuela. He later moderated his position. On 23 September, he addressed the UN General Assembly to call for a criminal process to be opened against Donald Trump for U.S. strikes in the Caribbean. Colombia convened an extraordinary virtual meeting of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States in September 2025. Which concluded with an expression of deep concern over foreign intervention in the region. Over Guatemala's objection that procedures were not followed, the group issued a statement saying the region must remain a zone of peace based on the prohibition of the threat or use of force, the peaceful settlement of disputes, the promotion of dialogue and multilateralism, unrestricted respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, non-interference in the internal affairs of states, and the inalienable right of peoples to self-determination. Guatemala's president, Bernardo Arevalo, said Guatemala was included in the list of 21 countries of the 33 members, approving the text, although it did not sign, nor did Ecuador, Peru, Costa Rica, or El Salvador. In August, when the initial 3 ships were deployed, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago Kamla Persad-Becesar offered the U.S. military access to the Trinidad nation for the U.S. to protect Guyana amid the Guyana-Venezuela crisis. Maduro responded that Becesar's offer was tantamount to declaring war on Venezuela, and threatened both countries with retaliation if Trinidad went through with its offer. Becesar later praised the deployment and the 2 September strike, saying the U.S. military should kill all drug traffickers violently. Foreign Minister of Barbados Carrie Simmons said that foreign ministers in CARICOM wrote to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio asking that military operations in the Caribbean not be conducted without prior notice or explanation. The deployment was endorsed by the government of Guyana. 2/3 of its territory is claimed by Venezuela, with Guyana's vice president and former president Bharat Jagdeo telling the Financial Times, "You cannot trust Maduro." According to Havana Times, the deployment reignited tensions and divided positions in the region, with the Cuba-Venezuela-Nicaragua axis calling it an imperialist offensive, and other countries hardening their stance against Maduro and the Cartel of the Soles. The commander of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard, Robert Scotland, stated that the U.S. strikes would send a very clear message to those entities who have been designated as narcoterrorists, and should serve as a strong deterrent to anyone who seeks to engage in the illicit trafficking of drugs and firearms within our region. The Office of the Cayman Islands Governor stated that the British government recognizes the importance of regional security and is committed to providing advice and capacity building to our Cayman law enforcement partners, highlighted the Mutual Defense Alliance between the British and American governments, and emphasized organized crime as a common threat. The United States maintains 2 forward operating locations, FOL, on the Dutch territories of Aruba and Curaçao, stemming from a 2000 treaty. In response to escalating tensions between Venezuela and the U.S., the Dutch have taken a neutral position, but say treaties must be honored. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans stated that the treaty permits flights from Curaçao solely for surveillance, monitoring, and the detection of drug shipments. This consent applies only to unarmed flights. According to the Curaçao Chronicle, the minister indicated that the approximately 1,000 soldiers in the Dutch Antilles, as well as the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard and accompanying aircraft, could be used if the situation escalates. On 19 September, Prime Minister Gilmar Pieces of Curacao stated that it would renew its treaty for the Curacao-based FOL until at least 2 November 2026. On 9 October, the United States expressed interest in establishing a temporary military radar base on the island nation of Grenada at Maurice Bishop International Airport. The Grenadian government, under Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell of the center-left National Democratic Congress Party, responded that it would take the request under review. Critics from the conservative New National Party, such as Chester Humphrey and the independent Peter David, urged the Mitchell administration to deny the request, as they feared that the U.S. strikes were a pretext for war with Venezuela, a nation that they say has not done anything to Grenada. The following week, Admiral Alvin Halsey traveled to Antigua and Barbuda to make a similar request, but was denied. Halsey met with Grenadian officials on 15 October. The meeting had no immediate conclusion. The government, working with CARICOM towards a decision, later stated that decisions would be deferred until all technical and legal assessments are completed. Accounting for national and public interests, the militarization of the war on drugs, also known as the war on cartels, dates to 1989 during the presidency of George H.W. Bush, when Bush introduced a national drug control strategy that emphasized supply interdiction and allocated significant resources to involve the Department of Defense. This included the creation of the Office of National Drug Control Policy and formalized the use of military forces in detection operations, foreign force training, and support for law enforcement agencies. On 18 September 1989, then Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney announced specific plans: a Caribbean counter-narcotics task force with military aircraft and ships, deployment of forces along the Mexican border, expanded use of the North American Aerospace Defense Command to detect drug trafficking, and training the forces in South American countries, such as Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Cheney emphasized that the military would not conduct arrests or raids, but would expand its role in detection and logistical support, involving a few hundred troops in Latin America. In 1989, President Bush ordered the invasion of Panama to depose the country's de facto dictator, Manuel Noriega. The United Nations General Assembly condemned the invasion as a flagrant violation of international law. The U.S. later provided intelligence about flights with civilians suspected of carrying drugs to Colombian and Peruvian officials. After several planes were shot down, the Clinton administration ceased its assistance in providing information. The United States Navy has intercepted ships believed to be used for drug smuggling operations. The United States Armed Forces broadly engages in joint anti-drug training exercises with other countries, including Colombia and Mexico.